Purple Maya, our specialty is providing cultural-based programming to learn technology and computer science. We are always looking for teachers, volunteers, and schools to partner with. But our programs aren't only for Keiki. Heard of the Purple Prize? We're accepting applications now for Kamaka Inana, a design and venture ideation program for adults interested in creating solutions that positively impact the Pai Aina. It's about shaping the way Hawaii designs for the future. Visit us at Purple Maya or purpleprize.com for more info. Also, how major is this podcast? Keep up the good work, guys.
So simply, a teacher leader is not a boss. They're not a supervisor, peer, and they invite others on journeys.
Really make real devices and real things that would make a difference in the world.
You know, you should be ingrained in what you're learning and don't be in the classroom. Let's go places. Let's go, out in the field and interview people and talk to people.
That I care about their passions and their interests, that I want to spark their curiosity, and I want to empower them to find out whatever it is what impacts they feel they can make on this world.
You are listening to the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast. Here's your host, Josh Rapoon.
Hey everybody, this is the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast. I'm your host, Josh Rapoon. We're here today with Doug Hugh, who is an educator at Kamehameha Schools, which has 3 campuses on 3 islands. And if I've got my numbers correct, Doug, I believe that Kamehameha Schools educates about 7,000 students. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is.
Welcome to the show, Doug.
Thank you for having me.
So, Doug, I'm going to go a little bit outside the box here with this particular interview, and I'm a little nervous myself because of the extent that I'm going to go outside the box. And we're doing radio here, so hopefully this won't crash and burn. But what I'd like to do during the next 30 or 40 minutes is to sort of engage in what I'm calling a public exhibition of learning. And the reason why I want to take that approach is because of the materials that you provided for me in advance of today. So you actually gave me a site, which is your site, and you gave me all access to that site. So I'm going to dig into that. And what we're going to do along the way is treat you as a student who is publicly exhibiting his learning. You get where I'm going with
Yes.
that? Yeah. And we're going to dig into the different parts of it.
For sure.
And we're going to find out who you are and what you can do and what you know.
Sounds great.
So, Doug, I want to start by talking about Manny Alo Williams, who, if you go to your site and you click on home, that's the first thing that any visitor to your page sees. So, why, when I click on your website homepage, is there a reference to Manny? Why is there a eulogy there to him and the various photos and the tribute video that you posted?
It's just something that will live in my heart. It was a relationship that I developed with a young man. He was in the 6th grade. I remember the first time I met him was outside my classroom at Waimanalo Intermediate and Elementary School. We call it Weiss.
Yeah.
And it could be a volatile place at times. It's a rough neighborhood. The socioeconomic status and demographics are such that it's primarily Native Hawaiian. You're talking about kids that are coming from, not primarily, but in most cases, broken families, single-parent households. I mean, we had a homeless population there where literally they were coming from the beach and their basic needs weren't being met. Manny wasn't that kid. He had a good family from as I knew them, and from the interactions I had, I just remember being able to almost look into his heart. He seemed like he was shy, he was timid. I remember asking him, "Hey, what's up, brother? What's your name?" And he just gave me this kind of this gentle smile with this humble look, and I just something about his disposition drew me to him, and he was my. And as a 6th grader, he was my gardening student. So there was a garden at Waimanalo Intermediate that was overgrown when I got there. I was, just to back up a quick minute, I was actually a student there myself. As a 6th and 7th grader, I did half of 6th grade, my 6th grade year there, and half of my 7th grade year there. And I remember that garden. I remember it producing corn and whatnot. And it was just crazy because I had ended up back at that school, and I was teaching in the same classroom I remember sitting in as a what I call a disenfranchised child or student. But Manny was my garden student, and 7th grade, I taught 7th grade social studies there, history of the Hawaiian Kingdom, Pacific Island studies, geography, and he became my 7th grade student. I got to know him real well. I mean, he struggled with his academics. He struggled to fit in. The culture there amongst students was such that it could be a difficult place to fit in, given, I guess, the negativity that could be it was being exhibited by specific kids, not because they were mean people, but because they had tough childhoods. They were in pain, they were hurting, and as a student who was in that same position, I remember projecting my pain and projecting my hurt. And when I seen other kids that had it good, I almost wanted to bring them along, because as the saying goes, misery loves company, but not just any type of company. It loves miserable company. And so it can be hard in that sense, where the kids are can create that environment because of all the pain and the demographics of the community and the school population as well. But so 7th grade passed, I got to know him real well and build a relationship with him. And then 8th grade came, and he was my gardening student again. But what was different this time was that he came back, and he when he was leaving his 7th grade year, he said he had to have surgery. He had a limp, so he something with his hip. So he told me that before he left 7th grade year. Then when he came back in 8th grade year, he had the surgery. And I remember him expressing to me how scared he was, and I would ask him questions like, "Hey, how you doing? How are things going?" And I could feel it, and he would try and confide in me, but it was hard for him to articulate himself as a 7th grader, obviously. And so he came back 8th grade year in a wheelchair, said he had the surgery, said so he was in a wheelchair, and I was kind of surprised. And then he said he needed another surgery. He was with me maybe about 3 weeks, and he was in my gardening class, so we were pushing him up there and trying to get him involved and make sure that he could get in the garden with us, because he was now in a wheelchair. And so he said he just kind of said he needed another surgery, and he disappeared. We didn't see him. Probably a couple months passed, and I asked the teacher next door to me, "Hey, have we seen Manny?" I think before he left, he told me that the doctors had discovered cancer in his bones as they were re-breaking his hip and trying to put it back together. I believe that was the procedure. And so, I didn't see him. I heard that the doctors had found cancer. I can't remember if it was through his mom or him, but a couple months passed. I said, "Hey, I don't see him. Where is he?" And I told the teacher, I'm just like, "You know what? Let's go find him. Let's go find out where he is." I just really wanted to know. So I did. I contacted the mom. I set up a visit. She said, "Come by." And when I walked in to his house in the Waimanalo Village, which is right behind our school, I didn't recognize him. He was bald. I guess he was going through chemo at the time, so he had lost his hair. And he was on a hospice bed. And so, I just, it was super powerful. And I just remember telling the teacher there, "Hey, no one knows about this. If I didn't know, no one knows." And even as I sat with him and I looked at him on his bed, I mean, he just looked like a fraction of what he had even left. And he was a skinny, very frail boy, so you imagine. And so I seen him, and I was like, I gave him a hug, and I was crying in there, and I left, and I told the teacher, "We got to do something. I don't know what we're going to do, but we got to let people know what's happening." And so I came up with this plan. I was like, "You know what? Get me a trifold board, a big science trifold board." And I said, let's just have all the kids sign it, and then let's make this message. And I had the educational assistant in my class be like, "Hey, I asked her, "Hey, you can draw nice." I remember her doodling all the time, and I said, "You could draw nice, right? Hey, can you make a sign that says 'We love you, Manny'?" And she just made this incredible sign. She did that centerpiece where it says, "We heart you, Manny." And then I just had all the kids come in and sign it. I had all these different Sharpies, and they wrote messages. And what I wasn't in tune with was how close they already were with him, despite the trouble and the tough type of upbringing these kids had. They were very tight, and they all shared. That was the one commonality that they had, that they could share together. And if you overlook that, that would be to your demise as a teacher, because these kids backed each other up. And so without me really having to try, the motivation was there for them. When I told them what was going on, I just was like, "Hey, look, I was like, look, Manny's not doing well. I'm like, I went to visit him, and it was just it was organic, and they started a sign, and we had this big sign. So I told the mom, I called her up, I'm like, hey, look, I was like, whoever wants to come with me. I said, I didn't know who was gonna come. It was just me. So I was like, look, whoever wants to come, just come in. I couldn't have imagined what turned out. And I called the mom, and I was like, hey, look, we're coming down there to your guys' house. We got some kids, they want to come. We got something we want to give Manny. Kids started bringing gifts. I mean, it turned into like this crazy.
Yeah, that's the video that you posted.
So that video is really interesting in that. So I'm, oh my gosh. So
it's like a parade. It's like a march.
It was crazy. So it happened at the beginning of the day when I'm signing. By the end of the day, I'm like, okay, I've got 50, 60 kids standing around me. I got teachers that are hearing about this just on the spot, and obviously this movement grew within literally a day. And I'm on the phone with the mom. I'm like, hey, we're coming down. We're supposed to meet. And she's like, we're at the hospital. He's going through chemo right now. So they're at the local hospital. And so I'm like, hey, okay. I mean, we got to make this work. I got all these people depending. So we go, we walk, we line the streets that front his house, and we're waiting for them on the side of the road. And all the students are like, oh, Mr. Hugh, like, where's Manny? Because it's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And I'm like, don't worry, guys. I'm on the phone with his mom. I'm like, hey, where are you guys? She's like, we're passing 7-Eleven. And then the sister was in the car with the phone. So she was videotaping the whole time. So they pulled in, and then that's where the whole video happened. And it was just such a magical moment in what transpired. Ultimately, 2 months later, he passed. And the dad came, and we made a bench for him, and that was the memorial that you saw. And it was it was Broncos colors because that was his favorite team. And it was kind of a memorial that the dad helped me and my gardening class. We all contributed and cemented that still stands there today in his memorial, and I'm sure his family visits it frequently.
So if your site, Doug, is like it's like a living or a very alive resume, what you've put front and center is something very important, which is a connection that you had with a student, and with a particular event where it seems to me a lot of empathy and compassion and kindness came up to the surface and was publicly exhibited by the community.
It got I think the sister put it out, and I think it had like almost 5,000 hits on Facebook, which I was like, wow, Right. So it was a great moment for the community, I think, as well.
So before we go to break, we've already gone a little ways here. Before we go to break, I want to just have you talk a little bit, briefly about the incredible visual quality or qualities of your site. Like, as I was going through page after page, it's just everything is visual. And I'm wondering why, in your particular case, where somebody else might have had a lot of text, you had a lot of visuals.
Because it's about what the students produce and capturing that. I think as teachers, we're measured by how much we can lift our students to success, how much we can lift them to accomplish the great things or help them accomplish the great things that not even they think are possible. I don't even know that it's possible until it becomes. And so I captured everything because I'm just so amazed with what they're able to do. I mean, they surprise me all the time. They surprise themselves, and then when you hear their growth through their perspectives, through their words, through their experiences, it's just something that motivates me, that turns me. Sometimes I think you could call me like bullet train Doug. Like, once you point me in the right direction, and then I see that. I mean, like, if we're going, like, we're just gonna go, and it's a blessing and a curse sometimes, But at the end of the day, I just wanted to capture the students because that's what we're measured by. I mean, I think that's how a teacher should evaluate themselves, and is by what they can help their students accomplish.
And how do we even know if we don't actually put up evidence of what it is that they're doing, right? I mean, So everybody, stay with us. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with the second part of our conversation with Doug Hugh. Back in a moment.
Hi, I'm Tyler Kern from Market Scale. We're excited at the arrival of a new podcast series out of Hawaii titled What School Could Be in Hawaii. Market Scale is thrilled to be partnering with Josh Rapoon on this project and can't wait to hear the insight and thought leadership he brings to EdTech. If you're enjoying this podcast, you can hear it and others over at marketscale.com. You click on Industries at the top of the page and then scroll down to EdTech. Hope to see you there.
Hey, everybody, we're back. This is the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast. Doug, from your bio page, I learned that you had, and also through a conversation that we had prior to today on the phone, I learned that you had a tough childhood. You moved a lot. You were an athlete. You have 4 children. You have an awesome wife, and much more, actually. So I know where you're from here on this island. But my question is a different one. It's actually, Doug, where are you coming from?
I'm coming from a place of despair. I come from a place that some at times could seem like there was lost hope. A situation where I was trying to figure out who I was, what I was good at, how I related to others. A place of shame. I call it embarrassment. But hope in the end of the day that I had a right to self-determination and to changing, I guess, the life I was put through as a child. And I often think about, would I be where I am today if I didn't go through those experiences, which I so despise and at times hold against or have bitterness toward my parents and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I feel like that's what made me who I am, and so I guess to embrace it and to harness that. I come from a place that I'm a local OEV. I mean, I'm a native son of the land. I'm only starting now to find out really who I am and why I was, what I'm good at, and why I was put here on this earth, and how I can relate and what impacts I'll have. And these are the same things I often try to help my 7th graders discover, but really I'm trying to discover as a 36-year-old. I'm just starting to discover as a 36-year-old, so I'm thinking they got a great head start if I can help them do that earlier in their lives.
So where you're coming from is actually from a place where you're just starting to understand who you are.
Pretty much.
That's a pretty awesome idea.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's crazy.
So Doug, I clicked on the next link on your page. And again, we're kind of doing a public exhibition, right? So I clicked on the next link, which was your philosophy. It was labeled philosophy. And what I expected is what would happen 99% of the time when you click on somebody's webpage and you click on philosophy. What I expected was like a series of paragraphs of words in which you were explaining what your philosophy of education is. And instead, what I found was like a Alice in Wonderland page of just craziness. It was like course syllabi over here, quest projects over here, reflections over here, forms, OEV, learning goals over here. It was just like, and it was amazing. And there was more exclamation points on that page than, like 20 books written about awesome subjects. And so this was to me, it was like a tremendous public exhibition of learning from you. But out of that, I wanted to pull your actual philosophy of education because it wasn't specifically written on that page. So what is your philosophy of education?
I mean, to put the kids at the center of everything that we do, that I do. Well, since I've gotten into Kamehameha, I mean, the Keala'ula program has been instrumental in shaping me as an educator, and then about innovating my practice and becoming better. I mean, because at the end of the day, that's all I wanted to do was be the best I could be at my profession. And so I guess my philosophy, it is a mesh of different philosophies put together. I mean, if you talk about Katie Martin, Susan B. Edwards, Ruby K. Payne was an instrumental author in her book, Achievement for Success, How to Educate Middle School Kids in Poverty. It was a paradigm shift that I had in that as an educator, you start off being the thing that you despised as an educator. I was having kids read from the books, take Cornell notes, answer worksheets, and I was just catching cracks in the classroom. Like, kids hated me. I was the most I'll say for what it is, I was the most hated teacher on campus in terms of through the kids' eyes. And I couldn't figure it out. Like, I got into education because I wanted to be the change that I wish I had. I really was never good at education. I was always feeling inferior, and like I didn't add up. And the only place that I really could exceed and excel was through sports. My family life was in shambles. When I came to school, it was just more disappointment and more failure and more that I can. And it was mostly through the traditional lens of education. And I realized that now as a teacher, that there weren't any teachers that I could connect with. There weren't any teachers that I felt cared about me. And if I did feel that, I was just ready and willing to just wreak havoc, for lack of a better term. I was really angry.
Yeah.
I was angry, but I was also looking and yearning and looking for role models, because I didn't have any in my life. But ultimately, I was at this point where I wanted to quit teaching, and I couldn't figure it out. I would shut my doors at recess and at lunch, and I would lock the students out and lie on my desk and look up at the rafters and think, like, what am I doing here? Like, I just would try to get through the day. And I was telling my wife, I want to find another job. I want to become a police officer, because that's kind of what I wanted to be coming out of high school. And then I went to the AMLE website, the Association for Middle Level Education. I just started saying, I actually said to myself, I had an epiphany, and I said, I want to change my direction. Like, I don't want to. There was this boy. There was a woman I'll never forget. He hated me, and I disliked him, and I was acting just as much a kid as he was back toward him. And he just looked up at me with a wet face and with passion in his eyes, and told me he hated me in front of his sped teacher, who he was an inclusion student in my class. And at the point, my mindset was like, well, that doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not here for you to like me. I'm here because I'm the master and you're the grasshopper. And it just was such a backward approach to teaching, and what could be called even a traditional approach to teaching, in that we don't listen to the student's voice, and we don't give them choice, and empower and tap into their passions and their interests, and really find out and that empathy for who they are. So I just found this book by Ruby K. Payne, and it was that Achievement for Success, How to Educate Middle School Kids in Poverty. And I was like sitting there thinking, it spoke to me right away, and I got into it. And in her book, she started talking about the cerebral development of an adolescent at this age. And she was saying, in the book, she was saying your prefrontal cortex, which is the control center of the brain, and it's responsible for all your decision-making processes and critical thinking, that doesn't develop in a kid until they're under pristine circumstances, till they're about 23 years old. Right. But if you put stressors on them, poverty, lack of food, violence, lack of sleep, then it might not develop till they're 29. However, their limbic system, which is controlled for their emotions, is developed when they're 13. So it would be the equivalent of a high-powered race car with no brakes. When they come into class, there's a student who says something about their mother, they're going through these things at home, their emotions are instantly activated, and they're not able to think about if they grab that book and whip it across the classroom and it almost hit someone in the eye. My approach before I read this book was to condemn, criticize, and complain about the kid. But once I realized that they really had no control over it, I felt this wave of remorse and this wave of it was me, it was me having to change my approach. And once I did that, my approach went from condemning, complaining, and criticizing to, hey, can I talk to you for a second outside? And the kid might sit there for a second, and I just keep teaching, and I look back at him, and 5 minutes later, I don't see him. I walk outside, and the first thing I ask him is, "Hey, how are you doing? How's everything? Did you eat this morning? Right. How's mom and dad?" And they would look at me like, wow. Like they weren't expecting that. And then I said, "Hey, we had kind of a nice area for them to just sit outside and be calm." And I mean, it would get crazy in my class at times, in everyone's class. All the teachers there deserve so much credit, but.
So your philosophy of education, it shifts in this mode. Maybe there isn't one before, but it shifts to student-centered in a way that allows you to open up to them and to start to gather information from them. Right?
Well, yeah, Dr. Payne said you should, if their essential needs aren't being met, how can you expect their academic needs to be met? And I knew their essential needs weren't being met, so I started to cater to that, and I started to cater to those things that every human has in them, that they want to feel valued, and I started making them feel valued, and everything changed.
So today, Doug, in 2019, in your position now at Kamehameha Schools, like, what are briefly, what are some of the promises that you're making to your kids now? And they might not necessarily be promises that you're putting up there on a site or that you're even saying to them, but in your mind, what is it that you're promising your kids?
That I care, that I care about their passions and their interests, that I want to spark their curiosity, and I want to empower them to find out whatever it is that they what impacts they feel they can make on this world, and that we're going to have fun, that we're going to not have it all figured out. As Dr. or Auntie Kukahakalau said, the teachers don't have to pretend to be the experts anymore. We learn together, we learn alongside one another, and that we're kind of going to go on this quest or this journey together, and it's not a perfect science.
So one of the things that's really crazy about this moment, Doug, is that as I was going through everything that was in this Alice in Wonderland place that I had wandered into, right? When you say, you know, I want the kids to have fun, and when you say I'm now, my philosophy and my promise to them is to care about them, it's easy to use words. It's easy to say those words. But what I was looking at in these multiplicity of videos that were up there was just, and all these exclamation points and what the kids were doing, was that there's visual evidence that they're having fun.
Yeah.
Like, your kids are digging into deep, serious subjects, but they're engaged and they're having fun. And for middle school students to be engaged in that way, it must be just such a trip for their brains.
Yeah. I mean, I use the information. I mean, it's not me. I'm just following the research. I'm just out there hungry to get better, and you get better through your research, and then applying that research to the field. It's almost like I'm in the design thinking process, just constantly iterating, empathizing, ideating, sharing, testing, iterating,
Putting up prototypes, testing them,
and then asking for their feedback. I mean, because what I feel like that's where a lot of teachers make mistakes, is that I am very, very in tune with what my students are saying, because if there's any credence or credibility or justification or coherence behind why they feel that a change should be made in my class, I am all ears, because it's a co-created classroom, and what the product that ends up happening is something that we both want. And so it's kind of like an agreement that we're making, and they buy in, and it's just crazy how fast things have changed.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Doug, and everyone out there listening to this episode, stay with us. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk to Doug about a number of things, including Mauna Kea. We'll be back.
Imagine a place where students use media, creativity, communication, and critical thinking to make stories come to life. A place where authentic audiences are enlightened by the kids who live there. Hawk Media Productions at Kealakahe Intermediate School, located in Kona, Hawaii, is an example of that place where students strive daily for the summit. From school broadcasts, Hiki No stories, community spotlights, and now podcasts, Hawk Media Productions hopes to inspire other schools to get involved in meaningful learning in the community and the world. Believe it or not, all schools have the students, teachers, and community partners to be the spark for what school could be in Hawaii.
Hey, everybody, we're back. This is the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast, and we're here with Doug Hugh, who is an educator at Kamehameha Schools here on Oahu at the Kapalama campus. So, Doug, I think pretty much everybody who might be listening to this episode off in the future, after it gets edited, will know about what's happening on Mauna Kea. And it's certainly not my intention today to wade into the debate about Mauna Kea. But as I move through your site from home to philosophy, and then there were a series of links across the top that were all ultimately quests. Yeah. And the first one that I clicked on, which is where I spent the most time, was the one about Mauna Kea. So I want to talk about, not about the debate itself, but I want to talk briefly about your preparation in putting the quest together. And that, again, what I was looking at was a sometimes very chaotic, but sometimes just it's like a wild garden that isn't actually that wild, of different things that were happening related to the quest. So again, briefly, like what's the quest about? What was the intent of the quest around Mauna Kea?
So the quest came from an idea that I got when we got to go on the Kealaula, professional development trip in Silicon Valley or San Francisco. And look, we visited a school called Millennial Middle School. Chris Baum was his name, and he had 2 years to create this school. And we got to speak with him through phone conference. And he said kids at this age, through his research, he went to different continents and looked at what education could be like in developing this ideal school that we were sitting at in its 4th year of conception. And he said what he found was that kids are trying to learn 3 things: who they are at this age, at this specific adolescent age, how they relate to others, and what they will contribute to this world. So I thought it was amazing.
That's where those 3 questions
Yes,
come
it's
from.
an identity piece, a relation piece, and an impact piece. So that I feel like that's what everyone's trying to figure out throughout their lifetime, and it's changing constantly. So the kids who are 7th graders, that's what they're trying to do. But he also said something that was keen, was that it takes like 6 weeks or more to dive deep into something.
Right.
Too often we're concerned about coverage and superficial type of coverage, but we dive deep. So we take a whole quarter's time, and essentially we dive into I got this idea from when we visited the Embarcadero IDEO, the innovations firm where they do design thinking. And so the kids just get to lead their own learning. I mean, they literally, so what I do is I start with the quest Mauna Kea was why is Mauna Kea important? How do I relate to Mauna Kea, and what will I contribute to Mauna Kea? And so we co-constructed ho'ike. So in 6 weeks, I told the kids we're going to have this ho'ike, and
which means
a show. So it's obviously we are Hawaiian learners by blood at Kamehameha, being that you have to be some portion of Hawaiian to get in. And so what they were able to do was they were able to really just go out and empathize. So find the research, find out both sides, from the TMT side and from the Kia'i side. They were able to work in groups, pick their own groups. When they picked their own groups, they ideated collaboratively about, we co-constructed these 16 criteria, and we said in my rubric, which is the highest part of our rubric, is the kulia portion of your rubric, where you're achieving, you're meeting and exceeding your goals and standards, and you are achieving academic success, learning at very high levels. And we said, well, what does that look like? If we're going to do a ho'ike in 6 weeks, what does a kulia, which means striving for excellence, what does that look like in a ho'ike? So the kids came up with all these ideas like, okay, well, you definitely have to present both sides of the argument. You have to have good eye contact projection. You have to have expert testimony, which is where we got local artists to come in, including Kalena Ku, which was totally driven by the kids. So they contacted Kolohe Kai, Kalena Ku, some other local musicians, and wanted to get their opinions about it. And so they would ask me, and I never answered their questions with answers. I always answer their questions with questions,
drive them nuts,
which is
sure.
really
That's
fun. Well, it's fun. It's totally fun because I'm like, I don't know, can you? Well, how can you find out? Well, what would be the best option? And you just see them, like, these wheels start turning, and it's just fun. It's fun to watch because it takes all the pressure off of you as a teacher, and therefore you can direct your pressure to just kind of guiding them with questions. And so they'd be like, well, I don't know how it's important to me. I'm like, how can you find out? Well, who can you ask? Well, what resources are there for you? And so it really forces them to think. So after 6 weeks' time, I mean, we went through trying to organize all of their projects within our schedule and make sure that, I mean, it was a lot of pressure because you had to think about, well, what classes did you have 6 weeks from now? And you're talking about 4 different classes with 20 kids in them. They were grouped, and so we had to, but it was all student-led. They reached out, and it was just the products that came back were what you saw, and it was just kind of amazing. And their reflections were profound.
Which I read quite a few of them, and they were profound. There was a lot of really interesting thinking that was coming through. And you actually remind me of this moment that I had when I was a teacher at La Pietra Hawaii School for Girls, where I had been grading kids on their papers, like any teacher would be doing, putting the comments up. And basically the number or the grade that I would give them was something that I would assign, but I don't think that they particularly knew how I got to that point.
Right.
And then there was this magic moment where I decided to open it up, and we spent a whole class session, 80 minutes, working on a rubric for what makes a great paper, a good paper, a great paper, a really excellent paper. And the students and I constructed this rubric, and then at the end, the last thing I said to them was, okay, well, so this is how I'm going to be grading your papers. And they were like, oh, no, why did we do this with him? Now we know exactly what we have to do, Well, everything became evident to them.
I usually ask them, is there, like, are we, before we set that in stone, I'm like, so does anyone have anything that they disagree with?
Right.
Does anyone have anything that they'd like to change? Because once we lock this in, this is ours. And so there's really no pushback at all when you're talking about giving them that final assessment. But even furthermore, I let them assess themselves and tell me what they think they deserve, and then we kind of just work it out from there.
So Doug, on your side, and again, staying within the quest itself, there's like literally 100 questions I want to ask you about, even this particular section. So the 2 questions. One is, briefly, what are the ways that you and your students co-created or brought in together art, science, music, history into this social studies project?
It was what they wanted. It was about where
They wanted to bring.
I mean, yeah, I would just suggest things that, I mean, I always ask them, if you're an audience member and you're watching a presentation, like, what would you rather have? Like, what would you want to see? And so they're like, would you want to see someone just talking for 60 minutes or 30 minutes, or would you want to see visuals? So we just ask questions about it, and what ends up coming to be are things that they construct, things that they want, things that they've always yearned for, that I think we've always yearned for. But really, at the core essence of it is like, what are you good at?
Right.
Like whatever that is, let's bring it in.
And it seems like you have become that student as well, because your whole site is not a traditional approach to putting up information about yourself. You're putting up in front of people bits and pieces of evidence of work that you're doing with the kids, right?
I mean, that's what it's all about.
Right. And that's not, what I'm saying is that's not typical. That's why I had such a reaction to kind of wandering into this Alice in Wonderland place. Was just everywhere I looked, there were bits and pieces of things that were profoundly interesting. And you could spend a whole day just going through a series of videos and finding things so it's pretty cool. So again, because time is short, I want to ask you a couple more things. So I read through one of the final project reflections that you really featured. And I won't say the student's name. Let's just call her Kelly.
Thank you.
But let's say that I'm her father, and I'm with you here sitting in a little conference room, and you're her kumu, her teacher. And I haven't read the reflection yet, and you've got it here in front of us on the table.
Right.
But you give me a chance here to ask some questions as her father. And I say, Doug, what did you ask her to reflect on? Even before I read her reflections, what were you asking her to reflect on?
I guess it was just I think Christy had mentioned earlier about her project that she had the kids come into, and she had this vision of what it looked like to her, and I had this vision of what I thought their learning experience looked like to me. But I really want to know what your perspective on it was, because a lot of times what I think happened through their eyes, I'm completely wrong about. So I just want to know how you felt you grew, what skills and what knowledges do you feel like you acquired? And I want to hear it from their perspective, because if it comes back and they're saying, I didn't learn anything, or this wasn't important to me, then I want to try and understand why, because that helps me grow in return, is really trying to understand what their feedback is. Because if I fail to listen to that, then I just become stagnant in what I'm doing. And at the end of the day, I just feel like their opinions, I don't feel like it matters. And so I would just say that, they're not going to lie, and you can't buy their feedback. No matter what, you can't. Maybe you could give them $1 million and they tell you what you want to hear, but it's not going to be genuine. So to have genuine feedback where the kids are saying all the things that they're saying, this was amazing, I grew this way, that way, I feel like I got to collaborate. It's just so validating for me, and it charges me up to keep going in that direction and to keep iterating and making it better.
So the second question, I'm still her father. The second question is again, briefly, who is my daughter? What did you learn about her in the reflections that she offered to you?
That she's a lot smarter than maybe I initially gave her credit for. She's capable of a lot more. Just humbled by the the way that they show connection, or the way that we connected, and the relationship that we built through this project, and I guess through their opinion of what type of teacher you were. Because at the end of the day, what they say is what matters, and that's everything in terms of whether or not I have to change or I have to keep going in the same direction is based off of their feedback. So it's so critical for me to listen to my students, because at the end of the day, if they're saying that what you're doing is working and that it's transformational, like who's going to disagree with that? And because it's real and it's from them. And so
I'm going to do something right here at the very end that might be way out of the box, and I don't know if it's going to work. But Doug, I'm going to step out of that role as her father, and I just want to have a conversation with you as a teacher, and me, the person having the conversation with you. Is it possible that we can just drop the whole grades thing right here and now?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Like, let's just stop here at the reflection, and let's stop here with me looking at all of the visual work that's up there where I can see her and I can hear her, and I'm understanding her, and I'm understanding her more because of our conversation. Is it possible that we can just say, no, there's no need to issue a grade here? I've heard what you had to say about her.
I think so. If you give the child a voice, you give the student a voice, because they're going to tell you what they think they deserve. So you look at a proficiency scale where a student is meeting and exceeding, they're they're solid, and they're meeting the expectation and standards, but they kind of, I guess, they stop there. They could be usually there, meeting whatever goals they set out to meet, and they're growing. But either way through this process, they're growing. So it's like, how can you tell a kid who's been trying or who's been doing their best and who's experienced growth?
Like, how can you?
It's just it's very difficult. But what I do is I have their voices included, and we co-construct what they think their grade should be. And at the end of the day, I wish we could get rid of grades.
It's a compromise.
Yeah. At least you're asking them to. You're including them, and they really appreciate it. So yeah, I mean, but it's something that we all have to adhere to as teachers. So,
Doug, normally in these episodes, I ask every guest to answer the question, what school could be. But I feel today that this entire conversation and everything that I did to prepare for it and everything I looked at is a pretty epic answer to what you think school could be. So, Doug Hugh from Kamehameha School's Kapalama campus, it was super privilege for me to talk to you today. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Coming up next on the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast, Christy Federle, Maui Campus Director at Hawaii Technology Academy. Find the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher, as well as at mltsinhawaii.com.
Join the ongoing conversation across social media. Look for Most Likely to Succeed in Hawaii on Facebook, at MLTS in Hawaii on Instagram, and at MLTS in Hawaii on Twitter. Tag your posts with hashtag What School Could Be, hashtag Deeper Learning, hashtag EdChat, and hashtag Education.
We want to hear from you. Send your comments, questions, and feedback to mltsinhawaii@gmail.com or direct message us on Twitter at mltsinhawaii. Our next interviews will be recorded on Saturday, January 25th, starting at 9 a.m. Hawaii time.
Find us at the Most Likely to Succeed in Hawaii Facebook page.
Video of each interview will also be available on demand on YouTube. Look for What School Could Be in Hawaii playlist on our Most Likely to Succeed in Hawaii channel.
If you love this podcast series, we would really appreciate a rating and review in Apple Podcasts.
It's the best way to help us reach a wider audience of innovative educators.
And please feel free to share this series with colleagues, friends, and family.
Your host is Josh Rapoon.
Our technical producer and podcast consultant is Ryan Ozawa.
Post-production is by Hawk Media Productions, the digital media program at Kealakaha Intermediate School. The editors for this podcast is Marlone Utrera.
Under management from Student Director May Kanata. All under the guidance of Media Director Matthew Williams. Special thanks to photo and video contributor for our October episodes, Matthew Tom, a media and English teacher at Stevenson's Intermediate School.
And a huge shout out to Ted Dintersmith, author of the book What School Could Be, an education change agent.
Now, off to your next education adventure.
Class dismissed.